Hi everyone, welcome to ANO Camera, pronounced Ano. On this channel, I test vintage lenses on my Sony A7 III. Many old lenses cannot normally be mounted on modern cameras, so I create custom 3D printed adapters to use them. My goal is to explore the character and performance of these lenses under controlled conditions. I hope these videos help you discover your next favorite lens. Alright, are you ready? Today, I'm going to introduce the lens we'll be testing. Today's lens is the SMC Takumar 55mm f/1.8. This is the SMC Takumar 55mm f/1.8, a classic vintage lens made by Asahi Optical, the company that later became Pentax. It was mainly produced in the early 1970s, and even today, it's still one of the most popular beginner vintage lenses out there. People love this lens because it has a really nice balance between vintage character and usability. The image has soft, natural colors, smooth background blur, and a slightly cinematic feeling without looking too old or overly dreamy. Compared to earlier Takumar lenses, the SMC version has better coatings, so it handles backlight much better and gives stronger contrast. Another reason this lens is so popular is that it's still very easy to find. Pentax made a huge number of them, so they're everywhere on the used market. The price is usually pretty affordable too, around $30 to $70 depending on the condition. It's not the sharpest lens ever made, but that's not really the point. This lens is all about atmosphere, texture, and that classic vintage look people still love today. Alright, now let's talk about the shooting conditions. I'll shoot wide open, and if possible, I'll also test the lens at f/8. The camera settings will stay the same for every lens so we can compare them fairly. I made an original test chart for these lens tests. For me, I mainly want to see how well the center and the upper right area are resolved. Alright, let's start by shooting the center wide open. First, let's look at the center circle. I wouldn't call it super sharp, but it still resolves the fine lines pretty well. I think this is a very solid result. Now let's check the upper right circle. The brightness drops a little bit here, but I think the fine lines are still reproduced nicely. Next, let's stop the lens down to f/8. Starting with the center circle again. At f/8, the image becomes noticeably sharper, and the fine lines are clearer than before. Honestly, it's surprisingly sharp for such an old lens. Now let's look at the upper right circle. This looks almost as sharp as the center to me. The brightness also seems much more even now. Really impressive performance. Finally, let's do a flare test with two different settings, wide open and f/8. I'll intentionally include a light source in the frame this time. First, here's the lens wide open. You can definitely see some flare, but honestly, for a lens of this age, I think the result is pretty good. With lenses like this, I think the flare is part of the character and something to enjoy. Next is the image at f/8. Now we can see a hexagonal flare pattern and some light streaks. Personally, I don't dislike this look at all. Depending on the subject, it could create some really beautiful images. Oh, by the way, there's one thing I forgot to mention. This lens uses the M42 mount. For M42 lenses, I've been using the same adapter setup for years. The main adapter is the Sigma MC11, which lets you use Canon lenses on Sony cameras. Since this lens has an M42 mount, I use it together with another adapter that converts M42 to Canon EF mount. I have to say, the Sigma MC11 is incredibly well made. The build quality and precision are really impressive. There are so many Canon lenses out there, and a lot of them produce amazing images. So if you're a Sony shooter and you've ever thought about using Canon lenses, I think the MC11 is definitely worth having. That said, there is one downside to this M42 setup. It looks a little awkward. Personally, I think lenses look cooler when they're narrow near the camera body and get larger toward the front. With this setup, it's kind of the opposite. Still, when I'm actually out taking photos, I don't really think about it. Alright, enough of the boring test shots. From here, let's switch subjects and take some more casual photos. But to make things useful for everyone watching, I'll continue shooting both wide open and at f/8 for comparison.